By season 20 of Sister Wives, Kody Brown speaks about the catfishing scandal with the casual confidence of someone who assumes the audience isn't paying attention anymore. When he says, "The catfishing stuff was probably stuff she brought to me," he's not just recalling the past, he's rewriting it. In his version of events, he's the informed husband, the one who knew something was wrong, the one who tried to help, the steady presence whose trust was betrayed by a wife who strayed. And if you've only watched the show casually, or if your memory of earlier seasons is hazy, that version might sound plausible. But the truth is, Kody's narrative only works if everyone agrees to forget what happened before the catfishing. Not weeks before, not months before, years before, because the catfishing didn't detonate a healthy marriage. It landed in the wreckage of one that had already been emotionally abandoned. This is the part Kody keeps skipping. Long before anyone named Sam Cooper slid into Mary Brown's messages, her marriage to Kody was already hollow. Not struggling, not tense hollow. By Kody's own admission, repeated on camera across multiple seasons, their physical relationship had been dead for years. Prior to 2015 years. That wasn't a slip of the tongue, it was something he stated plainly, more than once. No intimacy, no emotional closeness, no effort to rebuild. Mary was living alone in Las Vegas, legally married to a man who treated her like an obligation he resented. Not a partner, not a priority, a reminder of a life he'd already moved past, while refusing to officially let go. When the catfishing scandal became public, Kody performed shock and betrayal. He framed himself as the wounded husband whose wife had emotionally cheated and nearly left him for a stranger on the internet. That image stuck. It was easy, clean, morally satisfying, but it raises an uncomfortable question. What exactly was Mary betraying? A marriage that existed only on paper. A husband who hadn't pursued her emotionally or physically in years. A relationship that Kody himself had already declared dead. Loneliness doesn't appear overnight. It's constructed slowly, through neglect, indifference, and repeated emotional withdrawal. And Mary's isolation didn't begin with a catfisher. It was built brick by a husband who had already emotionally relocated into a new life. That context matters, because without it, the story becomes dangerously misleading. Kody often talks about the catfishing as if it were the original sin, the moment everything broke, the betrayal that destroyed any chance of reconciliation. But in season 20, he lets something slip that undermines his entire argument. He says, if we'd had a good relationship, this would have been resolvable. Read that again, he's acknowledging, in his own words, that the relationship wasn't good, that something fundamental was already broken. The catfishing didn't create the damage, it exposed it, and yet, somehow Kody never connects that admission to his own behavior. In his mind, the marriage was bad, but not because of him, the marriage was broken. But that wasn't his responsibility. Mary's vulnerability was evidence of her failure, not the result of years of emotional starvation. This is where Kody's logic begins to fold in on itself. Mary didn't wake up one morning in a fulfilled, supported marriage and decide to emotionally attach herself to a stranger online. That's not how people work. Emotional affairs don't happen in healthy environments. They happen when someone is desperate to feel seen, wanted, and valued, especially after years of being ignored by the person who promised to love them. Kody built that hunger. Then he acted surprised when Mary tried to feed it somewhere else. And when it all came crashing down, he used her lowest moment as evidence that she deserved what came next. There's footage from the Vegas years that tells the story far more honestly than Kody's confessionals ever do. Mary alone in her house. Mary trying and failing to engage with a husband who barely tolerated her presence. Mary isolated within a family that had moved on without her. And Kody always elsewhere, always distracted, always emotionally unavailable. So when the catfishing crisis erupted, this should have been the moment for him to step up, to say, "Whatever we were before, I won't abandon you now." To show that even if the marriage was struggling, she wasn't disposable. Instead, he did the opposite. He treated her humiliation as confirmation that she was the problem. He framed her request for space, made while she was processing public embarrassment, manipulation, and emotional trauma, as rejection, as betrayal, as proof that she didn't want the marriage to survive. But here's the truth. Kody refuses to face. He wasn't present before she asked for space. He didn't show up during the crisis, and he used her pain afterward to justify permanent abandonment. By season 20, Kody isn't just telling this version of events. He believes it. The selective memory isn't an act anymore. It's structural. He's built an identity around being the wronged husband, and acknowledging his role would require dismantling that identity entirely. And that's why the story keeps getting rewritten. There is an uncomfortable detail in the catfishing story that the show has circled around for years without ever fully confronting. It's the part that never fits neatly into Kody's victim narrative, the part that raises more questions than answers, and the part that gets redirected every time it comes close to the surface. That detail is the Robyn Fikendra Faye Jackie connection. Jackie Overton was the woman behind the catfish. She posed as a wealthy, powerful businessman named Sam Cooper and manipulated Mary Brown into an emotional relationship that eventually exploded into public humiliation. That much is undisputed. What is far less discussed is the fact that Jackie was socially connected to Kendra, and Kendra was close friends with Robyn Brown. This isn't speculation. This isn't fan theory. This is documented within the show's own timeline. And yet, this connection has never been properly examined on camera. Every time it edges into view, the conversation veers away. The focus snaps back to Mary's choices, to her judgment, to her betrayal. The question of how someone so closely connected to Robyn became the gateway to Mary's manipulation remains largely untouched. Robyn's explanation has always been consistent. She says she was trying to help, that she was worried, that she wanted to protect Mary and the family, that she believed staying in contact with Kendra gave her insight into what was happening. But Mary has told a very different version of that story. According to Mary, she asked Robyn directly to stop communicating with Kendra. She made it clear that Kendra was connected to the person manipulating her. She asked Robyn to stop sharing information, to step back, to let her handle it privately. Robyn refused. She kept the communication channel open. She continued talking to someone linked to the catfisher. And that decision would have consequences, Mary says, were impossible to ignore. This is where the story turns from uncomfortable to deeply disturbing. Mary has stated clearly and repeatedly that private conversations she had only with Robyn would somehow make their way back to the catfisher. Information she shared with no one else, details that only existed between her and her sister wife. And then Jackie Overton would reference them. This wasn't a vague feeling. It wasn't paranoia. It was a pattern. There were times I would have a conversation with Robyn that the catfisher would find out about, Mary said. That's not an interpretation. That's a lived experience she's describing. If Mary told only Robyn something, and the catfisher later demonstrated knowledge of that information, the math is not complicated. Either Robyn was sharing details with Kendra, who was sharing them with Jackie, or there is another explanation that has never been provided. Robyn's defense, when confronted with this pattern, has never really changed. She focuses on intention. She insists she meant well. She emphasizes that she believed she was helping. But intention doesn't explain outcomes. Good intentions don't account for how private information traveled through a chain of people directly connected to Mary's manipulation. And after a certain point, refusing to step back stops looking like help and starts looking like control. This is where Kody's role becomes impossible to ignore, because at no point did he ask the obvious questions. He never publicly questioned why Robyn's friend knew the catfisher. He never pressed for clarity on how information leaked. He never challenged Robyn's continued involvement after Mary explicitly asked her to stop. Instead, he defended Robyn preemptively. In one of the most revealing confessionals from season 20, Kody snaps. Don't put that on Robyn. That's totally hypocritical. Pay attention to that moment. No one had accused Robyn of anything yet. The interviewer hadn't framed it that way, and yet Kody immediately moved to shield her. That reaction tells you everything you need to know about where his priorities lie. Before he even knows what's being asked, he knows who needs protecting. Robyn's version of events positions her as the loyal sister wife, the one who saw the danger and tried to intervene, the one who had Mary's back when no one else did. She's repeated this framing consistently over the years. Mary's version sounds nothing like that. In Mary's telling, Robyn didn't help. She escalated. Every time she inserted herself, the situation worsened. Private struggles became family, wide confrontations. Sensitive details turned into ammunition. What could have been handled quietly was exposed and magnified. There's a larger pattern here, and it doesn't begin or end with the catfishing. Robin's involvement in Mary's life has often resulted in increased conflict, not resolution. And yet Robin continues to frame that involvement as selfless concern. At some point, effect matters more than intention. If every attempt to help makes things worse, and the helper refuses to stop helping even when asked, what do you call that? Mary may never use the word out loud, but you can see the shift in her demeanor over time. The benefit of the doubt evaporates. The trust erodes. By later seasons, it's clear she no longer believes Robin's explanation, even if she's unwilling to confront it directly. And again, Kody says nothing. While his wife was being manipulated, humiliated, and emotionally destabilized, he wasn't investigating the circumstances. He wasn't asking hard questions. He wasn't protecting her from further harm. He was protecting Robin. Which raises a devastating question. Where was Kody when Mary needed him most? The answer, according to Mary's own words, is simple. He wasn't there. She has spoken about asking for space during the crisis. Time to process the betrayal, the embarrassment, the exposure of her private messages to the public, and Kody has twisted that request into evidence of rejection, proof that she didn't want him, proof that she chose someone else. But that framing only works if you ignore the years that came before it. Kody hadn't been emotionally present long before Mary asked for space. He hadn't been showing up consistently. He hadn't been pursuing connection. The request for distance wasn't a rupture. It was a continuation of an already established pattern. And instead of recognizing that, Kody weaponized it. He framed himself as the husband who was kicked out, the one who was rejected, the one who tried and failed. But the footage tells a different story. One of prolonged absence, of emotional neglect, of a man who had already chosen where to invest his attention and affection. And when Mary was at her lowest, when she was dealing with the fallout of being deceived and publicly shamed, Kody used that moment as justification to walk away for good. That choice matters because it reveals something crucial about the story he's telling now. By season 20, Kody Brown isn't just telling a selective version of the catfishing story, he's living inside it. You can see it in the way he speaks, the certainty in his tone, the complete absence of doubt. This isn't a man pretending to be the victim. This is a man who has fully convinced himself that he is one. And that's what makes the situation so difficult to untangle. Kody's logic around the catfishing forms a perfect circle, one that somehow never includes him. On one hand, he argues that the catfishing proves the marriage was already broken. That Mary's vulnerability shows something fundamental was wrong between them, and on that point, he's absolutely right. The marriage was broken. It had been broken for a long time, but then he makes a second, contradictory claim that the catfishing is what broke the marriage. That Mary's actions destroyed any chance of reconciliation. That this was the unforgivable betrayal that ended everything. Both of these things cannot be true at the same time. Either the marriage was already dead, and the catfishing was a symptom of that reality, or the marriage was healthy enough to survive until Mary's actions shattered it. Kody refuses to choose between these explanations because either one requires him to accept responsibility. If the marriage was already broken, then the obvious question is why? Who withdrew first? Who stopped trying? Who allowed intimacy, trust, and emotional connection to wither for years? And the footage answers that question far more clearly than Kody's confessionals ever do. If instead, the marriage was salvageable until the catfishing happened, then Kody has to explain why he didn't notice his wife becoming emotionally attached to a stranger online, why he wasn't present enough to see the warning signs, why his absence created the conditions for that attachment to feel appealing in the first place. Either way, the trail leads back to him. So instead of choosing, he holds both positions at once. The marriage was broken, but not because of him. The catfishing was unforgivable, but not because he failed to show up. Mary is responsible for everything that went wrong, and he is responsible for nothing. This is why his apologies ring hollow. In later seasons, Kody has acknowledged that he could have been kinder, that he made mistakes, that he regrets certain things. But notice what he never actually says. He never says, "I neglected you for years." He never says, "I withdrew my affection and left you alone." He never connects his behavior to her vulnerability. And that's the apology that matters, because the catfishing didn't happen to Kody. It happened to a woman who had already been emotionally abandoned, a woman whose husband had stopped choosing her long before a stranger ever pretended to. Kody frames the story as if Mary suddenly chose someone else over him. But that framing only works if you ignore the reality that he had already chosen someone else. Chosen elsewhere, chosen distance, chosen indifference. When Mary asked for space during the crisis, she wasn't rejecting a present, engaged partner. She was asking for breathing room from a marriage that had already suffocated her. And instead of recognizing that, Kody treated her request as confirmation of her guilt. He took her lowest moment and turned it into a verdict. There's something especially telling about how aggressively he defends Robyn whenever the catfishing comes up. In season 20, when the topic is raised, he immediately says, "Don't put that on Robyn." No one had accused her yet. No one had framed it that way. But Kody was already on guard. That reaction isn't accidental. It shows where his loyalty lies and where it has always lain. He defends Robyn instinctively. He questions Mary reflexively. He interrogates her choices while refusing to examine his own or Robyn's involvement. The imbalance is stark and it's consistent. And that imbalance explains why so many questions were never asked. Why wasn't the Robyn-Fakendra-Faye-Jackie connection ever fully unpacked? Why wasn't the information pipeline investigated? Why wasn't Mary's request for boundaries respected? Why was her pain treated as an inconvenience rather than a crisis? Because asking those questions would disrupt the narrative Kody needs to survive emotionally. The narrative where he is the wronged husband, the good guy, the one who tried. What's perhaps most tragic about this story is how simple the truth actually is. Mary fell for a catfish because someone finally pretended to want her. After years of being overlooked, ignored, and emotionally sidelined by her husband, a stranger showed interest, asked questions, paid attention, offered validation. That doesn't excuse her choices, but it explains them. And explanation is not the same as justification. Kody never needed to approve of what Mary did. He never needed to excuse it, but he did need to understand his role in creating the conditions that made it possible. And that's the step he refuses to take. Because if he admits that, the victim narrative collapses. He would have to acknowledge that the catfishing wasn't the disease, it was the symptom. A symptom of emotional neglect, power imbalance, and abandonment that had been unfolding for years in plain sight. Instead, he rewrote the timeline. He remembers Mary's betrayal with crystal clarity. He remembers being kicked out. He remembers the moment she asked for space, but the years of neglect gone. The withheld affection, erased. The emotional abandonment, not part of the story. That selective memory isn't random, it's necessary, because remembering everything would mean admitting that he wasn't standing there innocently when a catfisher stole his wife. He'd already let her go long before that first message ever appeared in her inbox, and he's counting on the audience to forget along with him. But the footage hasn't forgotten. The timelines haven't forgotten. Mary's words haven't forgotten. And neither has the pattern of behavior that played out season after season. The full picture looks nothing like Kody's retelling. It looks like a husband who withdrew love, a first wife who became increasingly isolated, a fourth wife whose social connections intersected with the catfishing in ways never properly addressed, and a man who now claims he had Mary's back when every piece of evidence suggests he was barely present. That's the story Kody keeps skipping. And that's why his version never quite holds up, because the truth isn't dramatic enough to protect him. But it's far too consistent to ignore. We're not forgetting.